Ashoka the Great, probably the one Indian king we all have studied in schools. How great he was, how he planted trees, how he converted to Buddhism after witnessing the cruelty of Kalinga War. What if I tell you it's all a big lie? The evidence, Ashoka's own inscriptions, tell a completely different story. I think it's time to dig out the facts and counter the lies we have been told for generations. The story we have been told is Ashoka the Great Emperor invaded a tiny kingdom Kalinga, but the people of Kalinga were not ready to surrender either. So the Kalinga War happened, which resulted in the death of 1 lakh people, which is a huge number of population 2000 years back. So Ashoka felt really guilty and converted to Buddhism and practiced non-violence for the rest of his life. This is the story we have been told for years. This is the story which is still being taught in schools. We even have movies based on the story. But how far it is true? It's high time we uncover the actual story of Ashoka based on the inscriptions and evidence we have instead of making up fake stories. First of all, who is Ashoka the Great? And was he really that great of a king? Ashoka was the grandson of Chandragupta Maurya, who founded the Mauryan Empire. After Chandragupta, the power was transferred to his son Bindusara, who was also a quite capable man. He inherited all the empire, which is already quite huge, stretching from Afghanistan to Bengal. Bindusara carried the legacy of his father and expanded the empire further south, covering most of the peninsula except its southern tip. His time was mostly peaceful and prosperous. Apparently, Bindusara had 16 wives and 101 sons. Ashoka's mother Shubhadrangi was not a princess by birth. She was born in a poor Brahmin family. Even though Ashoka was a very courageous and a capable man, he was not the crown prince. A crown prince is someone who's going to be the next king after his father. Bindusara's other son Susima, who was also the step-brother of Ashoka, was appointed as the crown prince. It was all fine until Bindusara fell ill. He became extremely sick and passed away in 274 BCE. At that time, the crown prince Susima was in the northwestern frontier, far away from the capital Patliputra. Before he could come back, Ashoka took control over the city with the help of Greek people. And then Ashoka the Great assassinated his step-brother, the crown prince Susima, when he finally reached the capital. After that, a bloody civil war happened for 4 years, in which Ashoka seems to have killed all the male rivals in the family before being crowned as the emperor in 270 BCE. Buddhist texts mention that he killed 99 of his step-brothers and only spared the life of his own brother Tissa. And then he mercilessly killed 500 officials who were probably loyal to his father. Not just that, he also built a special prison for those who rebelled against him. It was popularly called Ashoka's Hell. Apparently, it was a lavish chamber covered like a stunning palace with all the luxuries like exclusive baths and gardens. It was artfully designed to make the outside visually pleasing, but inside the palace, it was filled with sadistic and cruel instruments of torture. Whoever rebelled against him were tortured to death in Ashoka's Hell. All the accounts we have of Ashoka agree that his early regime was brutal in nature and that he was known as Chandashoka, which means Ashoka the Cruel. Even though he was cruel in nature, he is being considered the greatest ruler of the Mauryan Empire. Why? Because he expanded the empire geographically like never before. His empire covered most of the current India except the southern tip, the whole of Pakistan and Bangladesh, and certain parts of Nepal, Afghanistan and Iran. It was around 4 million square kilometers. Then in 262 BCE, Ashoka invaded Kalinga, which is the modern day Odisha. It was a tiny but a wealthy kingdom which had many significant ports connecting to Southeast Asia. According to Megasthenes, the Greek historian at Chandragupta Maurya's court, the ruler of Kalinga had a very powerful army. Such a powerful kingdom on the border of the Mauryan Empire is obviously a threat for them. On top of that, Kalinga was located very close to Pataliputra, the capital of Mauryan Empire. Kalinga was once under the control of Nanda Empire until its decline in 321 BCE. But later Chandragupta and Bindusara failed to conquer it. So Ashoka was very particular about Kalinga and he invaded the kingdom as soon as he settled the internal problems. The battle was quite tough, but obviously the army of Kalinga had no chance of winning against the huge army of Ashoka. As per the raw edicts of Ashoka, around 1 lakh soldiers of Kalinga died in that war and around 1,50,000 soldiers were taken as prisoners. Now here comes the lie. We were told that he felt bad and guilty seeing the bloodshed of the Kalinga war and he converted to Buddhism, embracing the path of non-violence. That's what we were told, right? But the historical records tells a completely different story. As of now, 33 inscriptions of Ashoka Ashoka have been discovered so far, and they are classified into 4 categories: major rock edicts, minor rock edicts, major pillar edicts, minor pillar edict. In one of the minor rock edicts, it's clearly mentioned that it's been 2.5 years since he converted to Buddhism. I have been a Buddhist layman for more than 2.5 years, but for a year I have not made much progress. Now for more than a year I have drawn closer to the order. One has become more ardent. This particular translation was done by Romila Thapar, who majorly contributed to the history we study in schools, yet we are taught a whole different story. And let's not forget, Ashoka was married to the daughter of a rich Buddhist merchant much before he became the emperor. So his connection with Buddhism can be traced back long before the Kalinga War happened. The Mauryans most likely followed Vedic Hinduism, but the founder Chandragupta Maurya seems to have had some links to the Jainism in his older age, and his son Bindusara seems to have had some sort of connections with a religious group called Ajrikas. This is not an unusual arrangement in our culture. Even today we visit the Golden Temple and the Buddha Gaya with the same sort of devotion. Mostly all the religions coexisted peacefully in our country. So Ashoka's father and grandfather had some sort of connections with Jains and Ajrikas, and Ashoka didn't come to power in a usual manner. He grabbed the power by killing all his brothers. So there are high possibilities he might have faced a strong opposition from his own family members, who obviously have connections with Jains and Ajrikas. So to balance the opposition, he might have needed the support of another religion which is growing so rapidly, and that is Buddhism. First of all, he was already a Buddhist when the Kalinga War happened. Moreover, from what we know from his early regime, he was not a man to be easily shocked by the sight of blood. He came to power by killing all his brothers, and he built a dedicated chamber to torture those who dared to oppose him. Let's say Ashoka was genuinely remorseful and guilty of the Kalinga War. Then why didn't he release those 150,000 soldiers who were captured in the same Kalinga War? Why there is no mention of any such event? Even in the inscriptions in which he expresses the regret of the Kalinga War has a threatening tone. In one of the major rock edicts, it's mentioned that the beloved of the gods, that is Ashoka, believes that one who does wrong should be forgiven as far as it is possible to forgive him, but the beloved of the gods, that is Ashoka, conciliates the forest tribes of his empire, but he warns him that he has power even in his remorse, and he asks them to repent lest they be killed. What he is trying to say is, even though he is remorseful about what happened, the tribes of his empire should be ashamed of their crimes, otherwise they'll be killed. This is not the non-violence Buddha taught for sure. So by the inscriptions of Ashoka the Great himself, it is established without any doubt that he was already a Buddhist when the Kalinga War happened. Now the question is, did he at least stop using non-violence after the Kalinga War or after the so-called conversion? The answer is no. There is enough evidence to say that he continued to use violence even after becoming a Buddhist. The Ashokavadana clearly tells us that the Ashoka the Great ordered the mass killing of 18,000 Ajrikas, and this happened after he converted to Buddhism. And this is not the only disturbing incident mentioned in that Ashokavadana. Apparently a Jain devotee from Patliputra made a picture depicting Buddha bowing down to a Jain Tirthankara. You know what Ashoka did to the Jain devotee? He set him on fire along with his whole family in his own house, and he even offered a gold coin for every cut off head of a Jain devotee, and all this happened after he converted to Buddhism. And the violence stopped only when Ashoka's last surviving brother, who had become a Buddhist monk with the name of Vitashoka, was mistakenly killed. So clearly he was not following the essence of Buddhism. To an extent we can say he was just a mere follower who took up Buddhism for his own political gains rather than actually spreading the message of Buddha. Or maybe as an ideology he embraced Buddhism, but he was smart enough to understand that ahimsa policy won't work practically if you want to build an empire. Now the real question is, while every inscription and evidence we have clearly states that Ashoka was already a Buddhist when all these war and mass killings happened, Ashoka did wage war even after his supposed conversion to Buddhism. Even after the Kalinga War and his supposed guilty feel, Ashoka did not give up on violence. Now the question is, why is it that we are taught a different story when all the inscriptions and writings say otherwise? Why?